provide that feedback. Um, I think Dan and Travis will also be monitoring the chat. If you have any specific questions, if you don't want to come off mute, you can go ahead and throw your questions in the chat as well. Johnny, do you want to introduce yourself?
For those of you that I haven't met, my name is Johnny Cunningham. I am an ETL developer. Not sure about the implementation specialist part, but I work with states to build the ETLs to get the data from the state source system into Generate, and then assist with the matching and file creation process and all of that. So first off, I think we're going to start with just a quick summary of what was included in 5.1. This is not all inclusive, but if you check the release notes, you can see the specific tickets there with probably a little better description of what those were. But this is kind of the highlights of the 5.1 release. So we've got a couple of releases that are in fairly quick succession, 5.5.0, sorry, 5.0, 5.1, and 5.2. So in 5.0, we released the staging to RDS migration scripts for discipline and exiting. And they are, for those of you really quickly, they are a refined migration process that bypasses the IDS. So there's less code to debug. It's faster. The code that you actually have to manage as far as just doing a migration, validating your data is much simpler, much easier. And we're slowly rolling these out. We're trying to get as many of these done as we can with each release. So those came out in 5. So in 5.1, we were able to add the directory, grades offered, and I believe it also covers 190, the charter directory. So the staging to RDS script went in as part of 5.1. And that's the first bullet there. It says 29, but that also includes 39 and 190 are included in that code. So if you're working on those, you get to use the new refined script. We did, so like I mentioned, discipline and exiting and personnel, the IDEA personnel files, 70, 99, and 112 came out in 5. We found a couple of small issues with discipline and exiting, so we resolved those in 5.1. Normally, depending on the cycle, we might release those in a hot fix, but because 5.1 was coming out so quickly after 5, they just came out as part of 5.1. And then we're also adding end-to-end testing. We're continually building these. And the reason I mention these, you're not going to see them. So it's not something that you're going to be running in a state. But the benefit of these tests are we implement them on our side, and the test in combination with the test data that we're continually building and expanding on allows us to do a lot better regression testing. And then just full testing of if we load the staging environment with this data, does the appropriate data make it through to the report, to the fact table, and then to the reports at the end. So we're adding more end-to-end testing. We're working on 86 and 118, are specifically the ones that were covered in this release. And then I think the second block down there is resolving the data migration issues to develop end-to-end tests for state-defined reports. So there was a little bit of confusion on this before, so I want to spend just a quick minute on this. These are not the EDFACS reports. So we're not talking about the IDEA discipline files, and we're not talking about 009. So in Generate, if those of you that use it all the time, when you go to the report section, the very first option is EDFACS reports, and then I think it's SPPAPR, and then state-defined reports. I may have the name slightly wrong. I apologize because I don't use those other two as often. But that last option, we actually have reports built in there. And since we were working on the staging to RDS code for discipline and exiting in this last round, and also personnel as well, but since we were working on those, we also took the time to update and modify the 2 state-defined reports that are listed here. So disciplinary removal disciplinary removals of children with disabilities. I have a small amount of time, so I think I'm trying to talk too fast. And then exit from special education. So those two reports from the state defined reports now work. The only caveat, which we didn't list here, is in the exit from special education report, one of the statuses that it groups by is migrant. So, because I think it does homeless, foster, I think it does immigrant, but the migrant category group, we realized as we were building it out, we're going to have to make a little bit of a change to the staging table itself. And we didn't have time to do that and fully test it since this is a state defined report. So that one, you may see some inconsistent results if you pull this report, but we will have that resolved for 5.2. And then general work, we're continually doing database cleanup stuff. So there are some old stored procedures, things like that, kind of hang on from release to release because we just don't have time to clear them out. Like we've moved to a new stored procedure or a refined process, something like that. So we actually dedicated some effort in this round to get rid of some of that so that hopefully it'll make it a little easier for those of you that have to do the actual ETL work. There's, you don't have those additional stored procedures that you have to scroll through that are deprecated, not used anymore anyway. And then the last thing is metadata auditing. So this is a two-step process. So quickly, the metadata is sort of the undergirding piece that runs all of the reports, right? And we get that from Ed. So we get that from Ed and we have to build it into Generate so that as Generate is running a specific report, it's using the appropriate metadata for that report that year. And we have all of that built into Generate. So we have a process now that actually compares the metadata that we have in Generate to the metadata from Ed so we can see if there are any differences, which is a big step for us. So that's going to be really nice because it'll help us it will help us find any issues that we need to resolve. And then in a future release, we're working on the second part of that, which is actually going to then pull the appropriate metadata down from Ed and apply it to Generate so that it's an automated process, right? We will automatically compare and then pull any differences. But we at least got the first piece in now where we can compare and see if there are any differences so we know we need to address those. I think that's a high level overview of 5.1. So preview for 5.2. 5.2 is the release that comes out before the beginning of the year files. So we're going to have directory and grades offered. If there's any changes, we've got the staging to RDS went in with 5.1. But we'll look at adding efficiencies if there are any other changes we need to make. We'll pull the reports, all the metadata, we'll do all of that work, and all of that will be part of 5.2. We'll also have any changes that are required for 86. I believe we're trying to work those in as well because that's a February file. And then, like I mentioned, because we were working on discipline and exiting, we kind of worked on that state-defined report or those two state-defined reports at the same time. We're going to add an additional one, the year-to-year child count report. So we will update that, make sure that's working. That's part of what we're planning to do in 5.2. And then support for SEA implementations is obviously the stuff we do all the time, all the work we're trying to do, make these things more efficient, refine the processes to make them easier, add any sort of anything that makes it easier for you to migrate the data and then do the work of your matching comparison work. And then the last one there, I just want to mention, so .NET Core 3.1 is at its end of life. So we are going to be upgrading to .NET Core 6.0, and I am putting in the chat. So if you'll go to the chat and look, there's a link that will take you to the .NET Core 6 download. So in states, and the reason we put it in this one is you can go ahead and prepare for 5.2 because you can have both versions on your server at the same time. So if you want to go ahead and do this ahead of time, you'll just be, further ahead when 5.2 comes out. but this is something that will need to be done for 5.2. So you can, like I said, you can do it now, or you can wait until 5.2 is ready to be released, but we will need to do this update to .NET Core 6. So this will probably involve your IT staff. This is not typically something the ETL developers or something are going to be working on. So you can coordinate that, like if you need to add tickets for another team or something like that to start that process. Yeah, so that update is in the chat. Oh, sorry. I apologize. Dan, you go back one more. There is one other thing in here that I did want to mention. It's not listed here, but I do want to mention it because I just thought about it when I said the other thing. So we have, as we were doing the database cleanup, we are looking at, and we're coding and working on testing internally, a new validation process. So the old validation stored procedure was deprecated, and like it had some code in it that was producing false errors in the log file and things like that. So we removed it. So this is something for state ETL folks to be aware of, and it is documented in the release notes. And I apologize because this was my slide to do and I missed it. But there is for the states that have been with us longer, at the end of the ETL processes, at the end of the ETL code, we had calls to staging.migrate _ data _ validation, that stored procedure. And it did some basic checks and it would put errors or warnings into the data validation table. That stored procedure has been removed because, like I said, because it was throwing false positives, and we're putting in a new process to replace that anyway. So for those of you, if you can check your ETL code, if you've got like I said, for states that have been with us longer, because we don't use it anymore. But if you've been with us longer and you've got some of those older ETLs that were written a while back, you may still have calls to that. If you would comment them out, remove them, because it will produce an error with 5.1 because that stored procedure is no longer there. So that is something on the state side you need to be aware of with 5.1. Sorry. Thank you, Dan.
Okay, so I'm gonna sneeze in a second, so I'm gonna have to mute myself when I do. All right, so for 5.1, it was just released, I think on the 17th. So we went ahead and released that earlier this month. 5.2, that is in progress. We have already began our implementation work on that, and we'll be releasing that mid-December, hopefully a week or so before the holiday break. And then additionally, 5.3, be looking for that at some point in February. Any questions or comments on that? If not, we can open it up to the Q&A of 5.1. And I think you all should be able to unmute yourselves, or like I said earlier, you can throw something in the chat as well if you want to do that.
I'm going to stop presenting for now, Liz, so that we can see cameras.
If anyone's having trouble coming off of mute or whatever, you can add a question to the chat and we can take it from there.
So Johnny,
Yes.
the framework update for .NET Core 6.0, so that needs to be ran on the web server, is that correct?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
And again, for those of you that might, or that are thinking about potentially doing that ahead of time, you can have both versions on there at the same time. So you do not have to remove 3.1 or whatever version you might have on there currently. We use 3.1. That's what Generate is running on now. So you can go ahead and load 6, and it won't hurt anything, and it'll be ready for your web server. Will be ready for when Generate updates to 6.0.
We would run that on our development, QA, and production box web servers.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't think I've done one of these where no one had a question.
I was gonna say rough crowd
Wow.
today.
You guys did
Either
a
that or
great job of presenting.
somebody's typing a giant question.
I'm going to put the session evaluation link in the chat for now in case anyone has to hop off.
Is the dates that you showed on that last slide, is that somewhere else? The expected release, not the next to
The
last slide of when 5.1, 5.2, 5.3.
of the different releases when they'll be
Yeah.
when they're expected.
Or just sit it there a second and I'll take a screenshot of it.
Sure.
Okay, and I know that Travis, I know he posts these slide decks up on the SID website. Is that right? Travis, you put those somewhere?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
The
Yeah,
somewhere's
Lisa.
not always that easy to find, to tell you the truth.
Yeah,
So
yeah. And then
The slides and this video will be alongside the release notes.
okay, good.
I'll put the link here. 1 sec.
And then generally speaking, Lisa, this is going to be the release schedule every year, assuming we don't add an additional release or some other thing doesn't come up, because this is meant to coincide with the different file submission windows. So it's generally going to follow this same date structure.
Okay,
And
can
then
I
if
ask
we
an
have to
honorary
have-
question? Honorary question, do we have a goal to generally move it back a little bit further than right before the files are due? Because
Well, the last two, Liz can speak to this better than me, but I think the last two have come out like, I think 90 days was the target that we're shooting for currently. 90 days before, like the files that are included in that release are 90 days before their submission window. We're trying to
yeah,
hit those.
that's right.
And the last two, we hit that target. So if we can keep that track record going, we'll be in pretty good shape. And then, of course, if we can, figure out more efficiencies and things like that and be able to move it back further, we'll do that as well. But yeah.
But okay, are you saying the last two that are on the schedule are that far in advance? Because like the 5.1 release came out October 17th or something like that for November 2nd files due.
No, it came out for the 5.1 release was for December. For the December files.
That's right. And then the
It
5.1
had some fixes in it for the November files.
But I
that
needed those
release was-
fixes.
That release was actually for the December files.
But if I can't do my November files till I have it, it doesn't really count to me, but sorry. I
Well, that's why I
appreciate the
said,
idea that
because
there's some
they
other
were-
things in it too, but
I mentioned that because the releases were so close, we just put the changes in 5.1, but typically like we could do a hotfix release if we find an issue with something where we need to make a change. It doesn't have to wait for the next release. But in this case, because 5.1 was coming out very soon after we discovered those issues, we put them in there.
And Lisa,
and then-
if there's a specific schedule that you think would make sense, that's something that we can always discuss and bring to the larger group. We do a governance committee in which we could discuss it and see if that's something that we wanted to edit as well. So if you have suggestions, it would be great for you to send those to us in terms of the release dates.
And then I was just going to mention, Rhea, I saw your question. No, this is not something you have to do for 5.1, the .NET upgrade. That would be for 5.2.
Okay.
We're just,
thank you.
we put it out here because you can go ahead and do the update now if you want to, and you'll just be ahead. But no, you do not have to do the .NET upgrade in order to upgrade to 5.1.
Okay, I was just wondering because I think I missed that one conversation and I see the link on .NET.
Yes,
So I was just curious.
I apologize. I should have put that when I put the link that this was tied to the 5.2 release, not the 5.1
Mhm.
release.
Okay.
I'm getting better at this, just not good yet.
And um just out of curiosity, do we need to do the update on the web server? Or I can just access my URL, my website right now and just do it from there?
Do you
Or
mean for .NET or for 5.1?
451,
Oh, for 5.1, you can just do it from the Generate UI.
just whatever generate UI. I don't need to be in that box, in the actual web server box.
Oh,
Right?
no, as long as you have administrator access, which I know you do.
Yeah.
I'm speaking to the larger group. As
Okay.
long as you have administrator access to Generate, then you can run the update from the UI.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's the 2-button push, one to
Yeah.
download it and then one to apply it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments, feedback? Okay. So just a reminder, this is the link, and I think Dan threw this. Yeah, it's up further in the chat. You can also access it through the link that Travis sent out. Again, it's really helpful to the way that we structure these sessions. If you have the 2 minutes to do so, that would be great. We love to hear your feedback. And I think that's it for me, unless we have any additional questions. Anything else from my team?
Nothing for me. I'm just bringing the link back down just in case people lost it.
Thanks, Dan.
Nothing for me, but I'll hang on in case somebody has a last minute question.
Big text. Sorry about that.
We're not missing
Can't miss
that.
it. Can't miss it. Seems like we've had all the questions answered, so I'm gonna hop off myself, and I think we're probably good to go. Thanks to you both for presenting today.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care,
Bye.
everyone.